What is going on, Fanatics? Happy Sunday. Hope you guys are enjoying your last day off before the week starts. Blake, thank you for joining me. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Checked out the Combine these past few days. There was some stuff going on. Our Lions were well represented with one of our, I believe she's our strength and conditioning coach or something along those lines, Tanya Henderson. She got some love from the CFL, so that was good to see. And it was good to have some coverage. Dwayne Ford was on my phone this morning, so kind of made me reminisce. It's like, man, we're getting closer to CFL season.
It was nice to have some CFL on, being able to watch some CFL the past few days. You mentioned about the first stream, the bench press, the 40-yard dash, and then this morning being able to watch a little bit of some, drill work as well as some 7-on-7, 8-on-8, and 12-on-12 drills. So it was nice hearing Marshall Ferguson, Dwayne Ford, like you mentioned, and then having the Lions represented. I'm not too sure if you caught Mike Benavides. I believe it was the other day. I don't believe it was this morning, but he was pretty swagged out, Blake, in the BC Lions. The fit, I believe he had the kind of the Air Force Ones that Mr. Amar Doman got the team last year. Was in the starter old school starter jacket. So it was cool to see the Lions well represented. I saw Kelly Bates and stuff like that at the finish line of the 40-yard dash. So it was definitely good to take in some CFL content this past few days. So hope everybody is enjoying their Sunday afternoon. I was going to say morning, but it's getting into the afternoon now. Like Blake mentioned, got up nice and early this morning at 8 in the morning on a Sunday. It was actually probably more like 7:30, but I wasn't complaining, honestly, Blake, although it was a little bit early and I kind of took away from my last day to sleep in. Nice to get up. And honestly, the body clock kind of doesn't allow me to sleep in more passing kind of like 8 o'clock. So nice to get up. Go to the couch and kind of throw the TV onto or throw the laptop onto the TV with the HDMI and take in some CFL content and watch some of these prospects. So before we get into the CFL Combine recap, JC Abbott will be joining us momentarily. I would say about 10-15 minutes. So stay tuned, folks. But before, as always, all the reminders, like, comment, subscribe. When you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel, press the little notification bell. You guys will be notified every time Blake and I go live on the channel, every time we upload any sort of content, and all that good stuff. Be sure to head over to the Apple Podcast, follow, download the episodes, rate, review, all that good stuff. You can find the podcast episodes. Episode 30 is our latest episode out now with Jordan Lennon, Saskatchewan Rough Riders position coach. You can find that over on Apple Podcasts at Canadian Football Fanatics, as well as you can find us over on Instagram at Canadian Football Fanatics. The Instagram's going well. The social media stuff is definitely going well. I believe we are up to 150 subscribers now, Blake. Surpassed the YouTube folks. So we got to kind of even things out. There's 150 followers on the Instagram. We need 150 subscribers over on the YouTube. So if you guys are tuning in and you're not subscribed, please head on over to the YouTube, subscribe so you guys are not missing out on any of the content. All the support is greatly appreciated. And as you guys saw on the Instagram story, we now have merch in the works. If you guys are enjoying it, Blake has been bugging me and hounding me since last season to get some merch. We kind of were brainstorming in the off season after things kind of the CFL season wrapped up, what direction we wanted to take the podcast in. We decided to kind of go in a more Canadian football direction and kind of stay away from the NFL talk. So after that, I knew it was time to probably get into the merch direction. So if anybody's wanting merch, make sure you guys are commenting. We threw up a little poll on the Instagram story, was doing quite well. Let us know in the comments below if you guys would be interested. Let us know on social media. You can find both Blake and I on Twitter. Comment on our Instagram as well as our YouTube. Let us know how you guys would maybe want some merch styles and how much you guys would want. We would definitely be interested in making that happen for you guys in the near future. Hoping to have maybe some other things, Blake, like maybe some stickers or something like that made up for when we get up to Kamloops for the BC Lions training camp, as well as when Grey Cup is here. I would love to maybe have some stickers to pass out with people with maybe like the barcode to our YouTube channel, so that when they just open up their camera, they can go right to our YouTube from just scanning a little barcode on a sticker. And hopefully when it's Grey Cup, maybe Touchdown Pacific, we could be the annoying little Canadian football fanatics sticking our little stickers everywhere. So people are forced to view our content. So let us know what kind of merch you guys would like, other than maybe t-shirts, hats, hoodies, stickers, anything like that. We are in the works of making that happen for you guys. So before, earlier in the week, Blake and I were here to give you the CFL preview with UBC prospect Theo Benedette earlier in the week. We teased that Blake and I would be back with around maybe 8 or 9 other creators, CFL fans, to do a CFL mock draft, and we will be officially bringing that to you guys in April. Don't officially have a date cemented as of now, so stay tuned to our Instagram, social media, all that good stuff. We will definitely be letting you guys know as soon as possible when we get a date locked in for our CFL mock draft here on the Canadian Football Fanatics. But Blake, let's get into it, buddy. The CFL Combine, it was nice to be able to take in a little bit of content. And after the controversy that we kind of a little bit talked about last episode, podcast, whatever you want to call it, about the Combine not being streamed last year, it was nice to have the 40-yard dash, the bench press, and all that stuff be available to fans that want to take in that type of content. So what did you enjoy the most over these last couple of days, being able to stream the CFL Combine, Blake?
Yeah, I actually quite enjoyed the 40-yard dash, to be honest with you, Cole. It was nice to see. It was kind of trying to think of the proper word here. It was good to see. It was different, I'll put it, to see the time differences between like the wide receivers and the running backs and the D linemen. But yeah, it was definitely nice to see. They split them up into, I forgot how many groups there were, like 10 or 12, something like that. And then you had Marshall and oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. I believe it was
Jim Barker.
Jim Barker, that's right. Thank you, Cole. Yeah, Marshall and Jim Barker doing the 40, and I wasn't able to catch the bench press or anything like that, so I don't know who they had doing that. But as we mentioned this morning, for the 7-on-7 and 8-on-8 and 12-on-12s, they had Marshall and Dwayne Ford doing it. They had a whole bunch of CFL people out there. They had Christina Costenbiel, as we're going to talk to in a moment. They had JC Abbott from 3DownNation. They had a bunch of people, so Winnipeg was clearly the place to be this week, and it was good to see. The Combine, it's been talked about predominantly lately that it was such a thing before that it was like they used to do CFL Week is what it was called, and they combined it with the Combine, and then COVID kind of happened, and the CFL got away from that, I should say. And CFL fans really didn't like that. They quite enjoyed CFL Week because other than maybe Grey Cup and not even probably Touchdown Pacific, because other than BC and Ottawa, none of the other teams are going to be there. They're all going to be playing their own games that weekend. So other than the Grey Cup, it was the only time where fans got to interact with the players and stuff like that, the only time during the off season. So they were quite upset that CFL Week went away. So it was nice to see that Winnipeg kind of made it a thing again. Hopefully Regina can take that and even make it better next year.
I would imagine they do. Definitely not complaining. I like a lot of things that they added. When we talked about the some of the positional coaches being mic'd up, Tanya Henderson, Naaman Roosevelt. I believe they had a few position coach mic'd up as well today. Was super cool to see Willie Jefferson as kind of like a sideline reporter. The quite the character he is. Interviewing his teammate Brady Oliveira and all that kind of stuff. Also talking about a few prospects that specifically on the D line that he likes. So I think some very cool touches. Not complaining, but the one thing that I guess I would say that maybe I would like to see, I think a lot of fans maybe aren't maybe as interested in kind of maybe the bench press specifically, but maybe you're able to stream maybe like 2 days of practice next year instead of just one, where you're able to maybe really get some people excited on like maybe a Friday or a Saturday. Then they're really anticipated and kind of even more amped up for Sunday when they know that's like the final day that you can kind of watch what to expect, all that sort of stuff. Obviously next year people are going to kind of already know what to expect from this past year, but for someone that kind of usually tries to watch the NFL Combine a little bit, it does tend to get a little bit boring, other than maybe like the 40-yard dash when, the skill players are up, like the receivers, DBs, running backs. they're going to run fast times. Even maybe someone like the bigger guys, like we saw like a Luke Brew Baker, a bigger defensive lineman, some of these linebackers that can really run with some of these skill position guys. So sometimes the 40 can kind of be interesting and draw your eye, but and same with like something like the bench press, right? When you get a big offensive lineman up there that gets up to around 25, 30 reps, can really get jacked up over that. But I find that maybe you keep it to maybe streaming like the 40-yard dash and maybe a few, maybe it's like half of the bench press or something like that, and maybe you go towards a 2-day stream for the padded portion of it. I think that'd be important for some of the fans and something that I think the fans would really enjoy. So no critique. I really enjoy what the CFL did in terms of making it free and making it available for fans across the CFL. So really enjoyed everything that they were able to bring us, and really excited for next year, Blake, because I think knowing what you're able to expect now when we're getting all this content, I think the CFL did a great job on Twitter and stuff like that, the House of CFL as well, of uploading stories, Twitter videos, staying up to date and really giving us CFL fans what we wanted and what a lot of people were complaining about last year, not really having any coverage, any media sources there. So that's kind of what we're trying to do as well, right? With these recaps, with these previews, bringing on guys like JC Abbott from 3DownNation, who's been in Winnipeg all week, can give us his opinion from being in Winnipeg, seeing these guys in person, kind of being able to hear about who's maybe going up in the minds of coaches, GMs, not just in the minds of us fans watching who could have a completely different opinion. Blake, we talked about that in the last episode. So just a really good overall experience watching the CFL Combine this week. Big thumbs up to the CFL. I think they did a fabulous job in terms of also making it free and available, right? I know I complained a little bit about not being on TSN or anything like that, but when you can have it, at the click of a link, super easy to kind of, sign up for. All you need is your email address, name, I believe it was name, last name, and like postal code or something like that. You basically get right in there. You're able to access CFL Plus and watch all their content. I believe that's kind of how the American viewers can stream CFL games during the season. So big thumbs up to the CFL for creating something like the CFL Plus. I kind of equal, it's kind of like the NFL Network, I guess, or kind of like the CFL's own streaming platform where they're able to stream some things and make things available for their fans outside of TSN. So big thumbs up to the CFL. I think they kill it, as well as having some other personalities, right? Marshall Ferguson being the main one, but Jim Barker, big fan of Jim Barker. Anybody that's a fan of the Rod Peterson show kind of is familiar with Jim. He usually goes on there around once a week. Just a good personality, a former CFL personnel. And then Dwayne Ford, big fan of Dwayne Ford, the former Western Mustang alum. If you're a fan of CFL, you're familiar with his voice over the years and how he calls games. Just very passionate about the CFL and the game. Also, very highly knowledgeable when it comes to the youngsters in the game. He always talks about it in the broadcast about the CF, the Canadian Football Chat, and how they kind of keep an eye and get people ready for the next generation, the next prospects, the young up and comers coming to youth sports, coming into the CFL eventually. So just very good job by the CFL in terms of who they were getting to broadcast their product and how they put it out there. I really enjoyed. I know we talked about already, Blake, but the mic'd up portion was super cool to hear the running backs. I believe it was Nathan Taylor, running backs coach for the weekend, kind of mic'd up in the drills earlier on. Kind of, being honest with them. He asked them, how, be honest with me, how heavy are your guys' legs right now? I know it's the end of pretty much camp, whatever, combine, whatever you want to call it. But, day 3 of being in pads, you guys haven't been in pads in a few months. So, since September, November, October. So, just kind of cool to kind of peel the curtain back. Another thing that I liked is when they zoomed in on the play call and kind of heard the defense being called against it. And then you got to see what was being drawn up. So just super cool to see kind of behind the scenes, behind the ropes, whatever you want to call it. I think the CFL did a great job in terms of how they covered this week's combine. Blake, was there any, I know you kind of, you said that you were in and out of kind of watching the combine this morning. Was there anybody that stood out to you in terms of maybe just a player that you had your eye on? It could be even somebody that we talked about last episode.
Yeah, actually, it is someone that we talked about last episode. And he got talked about a lot, actually, when I was watching this morning. It's the Laval Rouge or wide receiver, Kevin Matal. He really stood out, and even Marshall Ferguson and Dwayne Ford were saying that of course it's the CFL Combine, so they're not going to keep track of stats or anything like that. But if they were to keep track of stats, it was they were pretty sure that Matal was definitely the top catch passer at the Combine. And as we talked about on our last episode there on Tuesday night, was that if he could have a really good Combine, and of course we won't know the interview portion of that, maybe we can somewhat get some insight with that with JC. But if he had a really good interview portion, maybe that quells some of the worries that CFL teams might have had with his legal troubles, we'll say, in the past. And at least in my opinion right now, I think he'll probably be a first-round pick on April 30th.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I'm going to have to pivot a little bit here, folks. JC will be a little bit late. He's just running a little bit behind. Will be joining us in about 10 minutes. So Blake and I go on a little bit of a tangent, maybe on some more CFL-based kind of topic here. But Blake, when it comes to maybe, I guess I was going to ask you maybe about the Elks perspective, but we'll go from a Lions perspective. Was there anybody that maybe jumps out to you that maybe you'd like the Lions to select, maybe with a certain pick that, maybe comes to mind when we're preparing for like something like our mock draft coming up? Was there anybody that comes out to or stands out to you in terms of like a Lions perspective?
Yeah, there is. And I think this would suit the Lions really well, actually, as we talked about on our last episode, at the end of last episode, how the Lions are going to miss TJ Lee for a majority of the season, if not all the season, with unfortunately his torn ACL. I think you're really going to like this man that I'm about to say, Cole, but he plays in our own backyard at UBC, and that's Derrick Cummings. He was actually mentioned a couple times this morning as well by Marshall specifically. That was someone that stood out, kind of, that was maybe a little bit off the radar coming into the Combine, which was something that when we talked to Theo the other day, he didn't necessarily agree with. He thought that Derrick should have had some more praise coming into the Combine, but the Combine he had this past week really stood out. He stood out, I should say, and really did a good job of possibly vaulting himself up the draft board for the following draft.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, excuse me, as mentioned, guys, anybody that has any questions for JC, put them in the chat. If you guys maybe put them in the chat now, we can save them for later and try to sneak them in for JC. I see that we did get up to a few viewers here. So just a reminder for anybody that is watching, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Expect to have at least a few likes, because I'm seeing some people that are in here and enjoying the live content. So
I know our buddy Jay's here, Cole.
I love it. I would love to see Jay in here and hear him in the comments. Haven't seen him in the chat, I guess I should say, in a while. It's been a few months since we saw our number one chat contributor, Jay, popping up in the chat. I'm sure once the CFL season, he will be as active as always. As we like to say, Blake, please smash the like button, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hoping to see the subscribers count go up, hoping to see the likes go up as well. So we do actually get a comment in here, Blake, and we can maybe take it now. We can save it for JC, but he is mentioning how did the running back from Delaware look? I believe both Michaels tested very well, and then I believe they were mentioning that they were kind of surprised, or maybe it wasn't even on the broadcast. Maybe it was the TSN clip that I saw the CFL on TSN Twitter account posted of Jim Barker, Marshall Ferguson, Dwayne Ford, Farhan Lalji kind of talking about the running back group and them kind of being, surprised and kind of pleasantly surprised about the position and not really knowing a lot about the running backs kind of coming in. I believe there's only 3 of them as well that were suiting up, and that all 3 of them kind of took turns showcasing well for themselves throughout the week. The running back position is definitely one that we will be asking JC. So thanks for the question. We definitely will be sneaking that in for JC in terms of how he thinks the running back position kind of showed for themselves this Combine season. We also have Cliffy D. Pine. Cliffy, thanks for listening tonight. We appreciate everything Cliffy does for the CFL. He is coming off, obviously, a Grey Cup championship and celebrating everything that comes with that. So big shout out to Cliffy. Cliffy will be joining us on the mock draft, as well as hopefully Cliffy will be as well joining us on the CFL season preview when that does come out down the road. So another one for JC that we will save for a little bit later. But Cliffy, appreciate your support as always, man. Anybody that is listening that's an Owls fan, a CFL fan, go check out all the good work that Cliffy's doing with the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast and all the good stuff over at his Twitter account. Go check him out over there on his socials. So, Blake, you and I got a little bit of time here to kill, buddy. In terms of kind of, I know you said that you weren't really watching you were kind of in and out of the combine this morning, but is there anyone that maybe on defense and offense that maybe stood out to you that maybe you might want to ask JC about?
Yeah, there actually is another name, and the name escapes me, so I'm hoping you can kind of help me out with that, Cole. But he played quarterback in high school, and then he went down to the States and played, I believe it was DB for a little bit before coming back, and he played at Concordia this past season as a wide receiver. Do you remember who that player was? I forget his name, but
he was taking a little bit of quarterback reps. This morning. So I believe it is Ezekiel.
Is it not?
Yeah, Ezekiel T. I wasn't sure how to pronounce his last name. I heard it on the broadcast, but I didn't want to butcher it. He was definitely someone that I wanted to ask JC about as well. Interesting path, like you mentioned, former quarterback. I believe there was kind of some what JC alluded to as a maybe a bug going on in the quarterback.
Bug. Yeah, they did mention that this morning as well.
Yeah, so having to kind of go to the bullpen, I guess, if that's what you maybe want to call it. The emergency quarterback having to come in. And he was somebody that, I believe it was Dwayne Ford was talking about as kind of someone that could be a developmental piece. Maybe someone that's, not as polished as some of the other receivers, but maybe if you do draft in the later rounds, can be someone that you can turn into someone down the road, right? And can really get around your CFL personnel, your coaches, positional coaches, and can literally learn how to develop someone. So definitely something that I had my eye on as well, Blake, and a good person to bring up. But without further ado, we will bring up our guest, JC Abbott from 3DownNation. JC, thank you for joining us. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
I know you are
clearly. I think I'm having a issue with
no, we're good. Yeah, we can hear you, JC.
Okay, I think I'm just on.
We can hear you perfectly, JC. So we appreciate you for giving us some of your time. What's that, JC? We appreciate you giving us some of your time while you're on the while you're traveling on the road. So thank you so much for joining us. But JC, I will kind of. How was the week for you so far? I know you've been out in Winnipeg all week. How's the week been for you?
It's been fantastic. I know people say a lot of negative things about Winnipeg, and some of them are true, but it's generally been very positive. I think the event, the locations in which it's been hosted, you couldn't have had better places. The Fort Garry Hotel, where most of the interviews have taken place and the prospects have been staying, is absolutely spectacular, like a 110-year-old historic hotel. I've never seen a CFL event in a venue that nice before. And then the field house itself has been perfect for this type of combine and all the practices. So much space, great sight lines. They really nailed it with the location, I think, this year.
I see your you have your winter coat on. Marshall Ferguson joked on the broadcast that he was excited, or he was glad that the combine was held indoors. I know it is a little probably chilly out there in Winnipeg compared to BC, but Blake, if you do want to kind of maybe start and ask JC some questions about the combine, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah. So JC, the first question I wanted to ask you was, how beneficial do you think the new format is for the incoming prospects? As previously, it was what we believe was 4 days. Is that correct? One padded practice and then kind of 3 days of interviews. And now it's 3 of each, 3 days of interviews and 3 days of padded practice. So how much more beneficial do you think that is for the prospects now than it was previously?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, and it depends on what you make of it, right? If you're a guy who's willing to come out here and compete, and you've got some real questions, you can answer them in this format. And it's not going to be just a flash in the pan if you do it all 3 days. They can't dismiss it as, just one good practice or one good rep. If you're coming out here and doing it consistently, it can really help you. On the flip side, if you're a type of guy who, doesn't have a lot to prove, then there's way more risk of injury here. And we did see a number of players this week bow out with little tweaks here and there, hamstrings, groins, ankles, things like that. Nothing serious. And some of those are legitimate, and some of those are perhaps played up a little bit, guys who don't want to hurt themselves by getting a serious injury or feel they have nothing else to gain from the practices. Depending on the player and the questions you have surrounding you, scouts are going to handle that differently and how you handled the interview. So if you're a guy that they had questions about how much you love football, and then you're going down with a hamstring, well, maybe you're not as high on their board going on after that because of how you handled yourself in that situation. So it's a catch-22 for some of these guys.
So, JC, we are live on YouTube right now. And we do have Cliffy Pine in the chat, and he did bring up something that I want to ask you right away that is kind of a little bit of a funny one. But he mentions, for JC, so did everyone at 3 Down stay at Hodges Place in Winnipeg. Good one for Cliffy. And Cliffy, like I said, man, I appreciate you for tuning in this morning and all that you do for the CFL. But when talking about the week, JC, can you tell us a little bit kind of maybe – for yourself, how you experienced the week? Obviously, you're at the field house and stuff like that, and kind of taking in practices and stuff like that. But how do kind of you go about, networking and building some connections within the CFL? And maybe it's like, as well, like as an example, maybe you're watching practice with like Chris Jones or something like that, where you can kind of get some intel about how he thinks about the game, how he kind of views some of these prospects and stuff like that. So how does the week look like for you in terms of kind of that sort of side of the game, I guess?
Well, it's nice because maybe you're not doing that stuff during practice because we're on a different section than most of the coaches, and they're working at that time, right? They're busy evaluating prospects. You don't want to sit down beside them and start chatting their ear off because they're trying to do their job at that stage. But this week has always been really wonderful in terms of those opportunities to network and talk not even necessarily football with these guys, but get to know them on a personal level. After the interviews are done, all the teams are going out to eat, to drink together. Guys across the league are networking with each other. It's not uncommon to go to a bar and see, coaches from 4 or 5 different teams all together having a good time. So those are the social occasions where you can get to know these guys, gain a little bit of insight about the league, maybe some intel, but more importantly, build the relationships that sort of fuel the content that we create at 3 Down Nation all year round.
Absolutely. Thank you for the answer. So let's get into the prospects here, JC. Don't want to keep you for too long. Like I said, I thank you for giving us some of your time when you're on the road and kind of settling yourself down after the combine. So much appreciated. Let's get into somebody that was, pretty talked about going into the combine about a late ad, and that it was Joel DeBlanco. I believe spent some time at the University of Cincinnati, spent some time in the NFL as well, and kind of comes down to the CFL Combine as a rare kind of prospect, or whatever you want to call it, but impresses in the testing window and has kind of been talked about as a early first rounder. What were you able to see from him? I know he left the padded practice a little bit earlier, but what have you seen from Joel DeBlanco, and kind of talk about his story?
For me, I think he exits this week as the consensus number 1 overall pick. I have a hard time seeing Edmonton taking anybody else at this stage. He's going to come in and be an impact player for you right away at the linebacker position. Of course, the comp that everyone talks about is Alex Singleton, who had a very similar story, late Canadian citizenship, after already spending a year in the NFL. This is Joel DeBlanco's story. Almost exactly. What impressed me about him, first of all, he comes out. I didn't expect him to come to the combine. That was not something that he was encouraged to do by people giving him advice, even because he already has these testing numbers, right? He went through the draft process a year ago. He didn't need to do that. He wanted to come out here and answer any questions, to do those tests again and prove that he is that athlete. And I think he improved from his pro day numbers from a year ago. So you see he's a guy who's a polished athlete who's going to be able to come in and compete and is miles above anyone else in that linebacking group. Now, I think smartly for him, he didn't compete in any of the padded sessions because he had nothing else to prove. But I did watch his demeanor because he was there the whole time in street clothes with that group. And it seemed like he was sort of taking on a bit of a leadership role. He was a guy who was having some fun with the guys, getting to know people from youth sports schools for the very first time in his life and meshing well with that group, at least on my first blush impressions of it. And that's something that scouts will also love. If you've got a player at that position who's that type of leader or that type of locker room guy, I think that will impress people almost as much as what he could have done on the field. So he was really impressive from that standpoint as well for me.
And even though it is a maybe a dip of the toe in the water, he does have the pro experience, whether it be in that training camp environment, but he does have that NFL pedigree and kind of being in that environment already. I feel like he was probably well prepared to kind of excel in this environment, and definitely excited to see. It's been talked about obviously on the broadcast and stuff like that on social media that he is definitely aimed to be towards the higher end of the first round. So it'll be exciting to see kind of how his path continues to go in the CFL. So let's get to a couple more testing guys that stood out with McGill defensive back Benjamin LeBros, I believe his name is, obviously lit up the combine testing numbers, finishing, I believe, in top 5 in majority of the categories. What could you say about his performance this past week?
He's a guy that is an absolute freak athlete, right? This is somebody who has NFL type measurables in how he tested. And I think that really impressed people. There were, expectations that he would do that, but you never know after a guy has been out of football for a full year, which LeBros has. Now, some of the other things about him, he still has to answer, right? He was out there on the field. He looked good at times, but he's a little bit rusty. He's not as technically refined as people. Teams are going to have different ideas of where he fits in a backfield. Is he a guy who's going to be more of a natural safety, or is he a field corner? I know I've talked to people who see him both ways. He himself sees himself as a field half, which is not a position that Canadians almost ever play in this league. So there's going to be some interesting discussions there. And there are some people who think his background's a little bit of a red flag, right? This is a guy who, by his own admission, left Syracuse too early, right? He had a very promising career there, didn't like how things were looking going into year 2 and left after one game. That's a red flag for teams. And then going to McGill, had a fantastic season, but wasn't able to play last year for academic issues and was not on the field, didn't find a way to get on there. There are people who are going to question how dedicated is he to football. Is he a guy who's going to scratch and claw if he doesn't like where he initially slots into our depth chart? For me, it's worth the risk because you are not going to find another guy like that in this draft class or in any near future draft classes with his type of athletic ability at that position. But there are real questions.
And do you think maybe part of his value could be in special teams with his testing numbers and stuff like that, or maybe a team says, you know what, we can take a flyer on this guy because of his testing scores. Maybe he can find a home on special teams for a year or two, and then maybe try to take that leap to playing in the secondary in some sort of starting capacity. Do you find that maybe for his path?
I think that's true for almost all these prospects. They have to cut their teeth on special teams. The nice thing with LeBros is when he was playing as a true freshman at Syracuse, I loved his special teams, right? He came down, he flashed in that phase of the game. So you at least have some precedent for, okay, he can make an impact early in the third phase. But everybody here is going to have to cut their teeth on special teams. Even guys like Joe DeBlanco, who you see as maybe a day one starter potential type of guy, he's still going to have to move down on kickoff team.
Okay, let's go to Laurier with Luke Brew Baker, defensive lineman. Very interesting story. I believe he hadn't played football until he stepped onto the campus at Laurier. But can you tell us a little bit about his story and kind of how he was doing at the Combine? I believe did very well in the 40-yard dash and a few other the testing as well.
Yeah, this is a kid who was a boxer in a tiny town in rural Ontario, like a town of 7,000 people, never played football, didn't think he was a very good athlete, but got in the gym. And he was actually a second-year student at Laurier when he decided on a whim, essentially, hey, I think I want to try football. Let me email the coach. And he emailed Michael Faulds with no measurables, no tape, no nothing, and said, hey, I'd like to try football. And Michael Faulds essentially blew him off until a few months later when he sent a workout tape and said, hey, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, I'm also 6'6" and 250 pounds, and I jump a 38-inch vertical. Sorry, what? Okay, you can come to our football team. And he made an instant impact, having never played before, 4.5 sacks in 7 games as a true rookie with the Golden Hawks that first season, has had a nice career. Now, he's battling recent shoulder surgery, so he wasn't able to take part in the padded competitive portions of this combine. That was known and expected. But what he did do in the testing was so impressive, even though we knew those numbers were coming because he posted them at East West last year. It's the first time you're sitting there for the vert in that room, and he walks up. Everyone goes kind of quiet. There's an anticipation, and he verts 38, which is ridiculous for a guy of that size. But that was the same he did at East West. And there was almost disappointment at this freakish number because people were going, I think he's going to do 40. He might do 40, and that would have been absolutely absurd. But that number, you're never going to see a guy at his position, at his size, do that at a CFL Combine. He made it look easy.
We got a question in the chat here, JC, and I'm curious, what position do you see CFL playing? Do you think he is a true edge rusher, maybe has some tweener abilities?
He's going to play defensive end for you. Now, he's more of a special teamer right now. He's not as polished as a defensive end. He's going to be dominant as a teamer because nobody else has that speed, size, and explosiveness. He's a real mismatch there, and that's where teams see him. But the comment has also been floated that, Tyson, Hergott, other guys like that may be more polished edge rushers right now, but they don't have the same athletic ceiling, and they haven't just been playing football for 3 years. So how much more is there to unlock from Brew Baker? I think there is something there, and he's going to end up being a better pro in my mind than he even was a college player.
Awesome. So in terms of the testing standouts, let's talk about the 2 running backs, the 2 Michaels, Michael Herzog and Michael Krisyk. What did you see from them in terms of their testing numbers and how they did for themselves?
Michael Krisyk, I think, is a guy who's going to go in the second round of this draft. He is an absolute freak, cut up like an Adonis, just an absolute dominant force in terms of his physical abilities, but was never a starter at Delaware State. Saw his production fluctuate pretty wildly there. I think the good thing for him is he's got really good special teams tape, right? You don't see a guy typically in the NCAA where special teams is less important, put up a lot of special teams tackles, and he had 9 last year in 12 games for Delaware State. So this is a guy you can feel fairly confident he's going to come in and contribute for you in that phase of the game, can play fullback, can pinch hit at running back, but maybe isn't the most natural guy actually running in the backfield. I don't know if he's going to actually be a ratio breaking type of back. That's not what I see him as. I see him more as a special teams guru, a guy who can, do that sort of in-between role of running back and fullback however you need it. Michael Herzog, I absolutely love the way he runs the ball. He's explosive and fast. The problem with him is the size, right? He is 5'8", and now he's got good thickness at 200 pounds, but it really shows up in the pass protection and on the special teams stuff. That's going to be a real struggle for him to even get drafted or earn a role in training camp with a CFL team, because they're not going to hand him a starting running back job. They're going to expect him to do those things. And right now he has very serious questions about those aspects of his game. Now, he wasn't able to help himself with the strength portion because he tweaked a pec, I believe, a week ago. So he wasn't able to bench at the combine. Now, he claims to me that he benched 22 before he tweaked it, which would be very impressive if he did. But right now, teams don't know what his actual strength level is, and it shows up when he's getting bull rushed by these defensive linemen. That's going to be something that is going to take him off a number of teams' boards.
Yeah, so JC, we talked about a few guys that stood out in terms of the testing portion of the combine. Is there any other names that come to mind besides the other few names that we've talked about?
I thought Kevin Matal and Kevin's Clercius both had exceptional weeks at the receiver position. They're going to be really good players in this league. Matal, I think, can be a ratio-breaking type of receiver, a former Heck Creighton Trophy winner. Clercius is more physical than anybody, and he's going to be able to block and contribute on special teams at a higher level than the other receivers. And then the offensive line group, I thought, is spectacular. Maybe the best offensive line class ever, including some of the guys who weren't here, the NCAA talents that are going to have NFL opportunities. But George Una, Nathan Dumoulin-Duguay from Laval, and even John Bosse from the University of Calgary, I thought were exceptional this week. And Christy Nakanu also helped himself from Washington State. All of those guys, I think, are starting caliber players in the CFL. Who have a lot of potential still left to unlock.
So let's talk about. Go ahead, Blake.
Sorry. So JC, we talked about. You mentioned Kevin Matal and John Bosse. We had those guys as our prospects to watch, or at least a couple of them coming into the combine. Is there someone else that maybe is off people's radars that you think did a good job of boosting himself up the draft board this week?
I mean, those were the big. Not enough people were talking about George Unga going in, and I think his ability to play center as well has helped him. He looks really, really polished, moves exceptionally well. I think Jackson Sombeck as a undersized invitational invitee. I have a soft spot for him. I thought he looked really good during portions of practice. How much teams take into account his lack of size is going to be a big question. Same with Derrick Cummings, who I think is probably behind LeBlanc, the second best corner prospect here at the draft. Doesn't necessarily have the physical measurables, either in the testing or in the size. Was just a damn good football player. Didn't get to show it past day one of practice because he tweaked a hammy, but I think he's a guy that teams are higher on than most expect because of his size.
So, JC, you mentioned him earlier. Let's talk about Kevin Matal. Obviously, everyone was a little bit worked up over the, I believe he came in at 6'3", 230 pounds. Everybody's worried about, was he training for it? Was he taking this seriously? He runs the 40. He puts kind of those questions to bed, and then he puts the pads on and has stolen the show. I mean, he was fairly busy this morning on the stream. Dwayne Ford and Marshall were kind of mentioning that, we're not keeping any stats here, but he's by far the leading receptions, yards, and kind of he was getting targeted the most. What do you think he's done for his stock, and where do you see his ceiling in terms of maybe where he's going in the CFL draft?
Yeah, I'll just answer this quickly because my phone's about to die here, and so I've got to run. But Kevin was exceptional all week. I know people were concerned about how fast he would be, especially because he's got that 230-pound frame, but he doesn't look like a gym god, right? He's a little bit sloppy, maybe is the term. Doesn't necessarily look like he's in shape, but boy, does he act like it because he runs out there with that 40 time. It's exceptional for the position at a CFL Combine and just produces rep after rep when he really didn't have to. Like today, he got a little bit of a shoulder stinger, went to the trainer. I thought, okay, he's going to shut it down because he's done everything he needed to do this week already. There's no reason for him to risk it anymore. He was back out there the next rep. So Kevin Matal wants to play. I think he really answered a lot of the character questions about him stemming from his bar fight incident in 2021. Teams were impressed with how he interviewed. And I would not be shocked, gentlemen, if the Ottawa Redblacks, who desperately need a receiver, go with Kevin Matal with the second overall pick.
Wow, interesting to hear. JC, thank you so much for joining us while you're on the road, like I mentioned. Quick little plug, where can the people find your work and everything that you've been putting out there?
Yeah, you can check out my work on 3DownNation or on Twitter at the JC Abbott.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JC, for joining us, and safe travels back to BC.
Thanks JC.
For having me, guys.
Take care, JC. So, awesome chance to have JC Abbott on here from 3Down Nation, obviously a big-time contributor, one of the three pillars over there at 3Down Nation, who does a fabulous job of covering our league. Was able to get him on the program and kind of talk about his experience being out there in Winnipeg. Like I mentioned, something that I was curious of kind of how he's able to network, build connections, like he mentioned about kind of, you know what, after the combine's over, after practices and all that stuff, you know, it's not out of the normal to go out to, you know, the bar and see somebody from, you know, the Saskatchewan Roughriders and you're able to kind of bounce, you know, kind of your opinions off him, how they're feeling. So you're able to kind of, you know, network for yourself, build connections where, you know, those guys are, you know, true insiders in the CFL. So they can kind of really have a good opinion of who's coming into the CFL, what teams think of them, and, you know, what they think of them in their own opinions themselves. So big thanks to JC for coming on the program. Apologize for not getting every question in there. It was kind of we knew JC was on a time limit and in between traveling to the airport. So try to get a few questions in there as much as we could. We will definitely have JC back on the program here. Somebody that's been on the channel a few times, had him on the channel last year going into the season, if I'm not mistaken. So just big time shout out to JC. There was a few questions in here that we're wanting to get to JC. So unfortunate, folks, that we weren't able to ask him, but I was interested to see maybe who were a few of these global players that he was maybe excited for. It wasn't really hearing any global teams or anything like that kind of being brought up in the stream. So personally don't really have a good idea if there was any global players that were kind of rising their stock.
There was one guy from, I believe it was Germany, Cole, played for Frankfurt or something like that, but his name escapes me, but other than that, I don't think there was very many globals at the Combine.
The global draft has been, you know, maybe viewed as maybe from a social media perspective, as kind of like a joke over the years. But I feel like if you really pay attention over to the last maybe 2 or 3 drafts, there have been some contributors come out. You know, I think of the guy from Winnipeg, the special teamer. We obviously have one in BC with Thibaut Tobaye, who contributes, you know, quite a bit of snaps for our defense at, you know, in that defensive tackle position. So I feel like slowly, like the CFL draft was kind of, you know, considered a joke in you know, previous years. I feel like the respect is building and the global draft will continue to be something that is a very valuable asset for CFL teams to build their rosters and find contributors through the CFL global draft, because I think it'll only continue to get better and we'll only continue to find you know, guys that are, you know, gems and can be brought into these organizations and learn how to you know, play the game and get better and grow in these organizations. So something that I try to keep my eye out, but I didn't really hear too many global players being mentioned or being brought up this morning. So definitely will have my eye on the global draft this year. Not too sure if we will do any content for the global draft. I believe it's either the morning of or the day before, something like that, of the actual draft. So it's around
it's pretty similar.
Yeah. But you know, definitely I would keep an eye on that, folks, because you never know what team, what player will you know, land the lucky global player that maybe is a contributor and can maybe be turned into some sort of player down the road. I feel like Thibaut Tobaye can maybe be that for the BC Lions. I feel like he's only been given the opportunity to be given more snaps over the last, I believe it's 2 years he's been with the Lions. Mm-hmm. Last year he really kind of upped his snap counts when Nathan Cherry went out. Some of the guys, you know, Woody Barron being banged up and stuff like that, he really kind of got bolted up the snap count percentage there and was being you know, hanging in there, considering, you know, like I mentioned, a global player, a guy that really is probably not viewed as maybe giving some valuable snaps in the CFL, but did a very good job. And I think if you asked John Bowman, if you asked you know, RP on that defense, they would have some very good reviews and high ravings of Thibaut Tobaye as a football player. So definitely keep an eye on the global players. So Cliffy, as always, jumps in. Global draft is the same day as the national draft, just done earlier in the day, the morning of. I remembered it being kind of the morning of or maybe the next day, with shout out to the Arrow Up series that we mentioned in the last show, Blake. Our BC Lions are doing a fabulous job of putting out content, and I remember the global draft kind of being within the same 24 hours of the CFL draft. So I think it's a super cool kind of thing that they do in the CFL, that it's the same day, kind of makes the global players feel special, that it's, you know, one big draft day. They're just a little bit different in terms of it's just an all global and all national draft. So another question that I did want to ask JC was, did JC like I believe it's Georgia Doku from University of Saskatchewan. He was somebody that I went back and forth with Blake on my top 5 players article to watch. Was going to include him, ended up going away from it and including a few other guys instead. But a guy that when I watched the UBC at Saskatchewan, I believe it was in October game there on the Canada West TV broadcast again, somebody that stood out, had a few reps that he beat actually UBC offensive tackle Giovanni Manu. So it was super cool to see him, a guy that I had my eye on as well this weekend. Was curious to see how JC viewed him as well. I think he can be a key contributor because he is another guy that's, I think, an athletic type defensive end that can play special teams and be a key contributor. The one hyphenated kid, we have another question. The one hyphenated kid from Nebraska seemed intriguing, I think, from American Samoa. Don't remember his name, but I do remember seeing them kind of being talked about as well. But Blake, kind of to get back on to topic here, a few on-field standouts to discuss, more specifically some of the guys that we kind of brought up in the show earlier in the week of the preview. A guy that I wanted to bring up was Derrick Cummings. Like JC kind of quickly mentioned, a guy that maybe didn't test as great. I believe he ran, in the 4.7s, 4.8s in the actual 40-yard dash, which isn't the greatest. Is on the smaller side. I believe he's actually under 6 feet as a corner, but was the day one coach's pick for a player who stood out when the pads went on. And then JC alluded to, right, when the pads went on, he is just a heck of a football player. He was somebody that I believe was kind of the rave on social media was how he gets in and out of breaks, how quick and how fluid he is, kind of being able to break on the football, staying with receivers. So maybe a guy that doesn't test phenomenally, but a guy when you put the tape on, when you throw the pads on, a guy that's willing to perform, and still a guy that I personally have my eye on is Derrick Cummings. And I think if he really lands in a nice home, maybe it's a UBC, a BC Lions that really knows kind of how to maybe mold him and kind of treat him right and really build him, not throw him to the wolves right away. I think that's the best course of action for Derrick Cummings, is probably not being a day one starter. Maybe it's a year 2, year 3 plan where he really is a major contributor. And if he can play special teams, even the better. It's definitely going to be hard to, Jim Barker and Marshall Ferguson were doing a good job of, if you want to play field corner in the CFL, Blake, that's kind of, the wider side, for those that maybe aren't aware, the wider side of the field, right? Where maybe that receiver or that position is more tended to get a lot of the deep balls, right? Because you're out there on an island, if that's what you want to call it. You're probably going to want to run in the, 4.65s, 4.6s to hang with some of these field options. You think of someone like an Alex Hollins playing out there in the field, right? Someone that's taking the top off the defenses. If you're not as quick as some of these guys, they're going to really take advantage of some of these field corners. So definitely tough to see. So I feel like if Derrick wants to, stay at his natural position, playing that kind of boundary and or field corner position, especially just outside, don't really see his body type to transition into playing halfback and covering some of those slot receivers, especially with his speed being where it is. So I think Derrick is kind of maybe a guy that maybe you can kind of bring in, not really maybe be relying upon to be a key contributor on day one, but maybe a guy that you can mold into being someone that's a gem down the line. So interested to see how Derrick does. Like JC mentioned, he did bow out after day one of padded practices to a little nick. So from what we're hearing, it is nothing major. It sounds like just a little bit of a precaution. Some of these guys, right, they're probably getting, CFL coaches in the ear that, don't risk it, man. Like, from our perspective, your stock's already pretty high, right? Some coaches, maybe they want to see something different. So I feel like it's not just all on Derrick to kind of shut it down. He's probably getting good advice for some of these organizations that, what, man, like from our perspective, we've already seen enough. We really like what we've seen from you. Don't feel any kind of obligation to kind of come out here and really put yourself at risk of, tearing a hamstring, tearing a whatever it may be, a calf muscle, and making yourself suffer even more. Like we kind of mentioned, right? The interesting thing about the CFL, Blake, is you get drafted and it's a quick turnaround. I believe it's maybe 8 or 10 days after that you're in rookie camp. It's kind of a much different transition in the NFL, where it's you get rookie OTAs, rookie mini camp, you get all these things that kind of get acclimated, and then you get into training camp where the vets show up and all that sort of stuff. In the CFL, you get to I believe it's Kamloops. If you're the BC Lions draftees, I believe it's have a 3 or 4 day, maybe it's a 5-day, week-long rookie camp, and then the vets come right in, and you're kind of right in the thick of things in training camp, and then preseason games start to happen, and it's a whole lot quicker than the NFL process. So something that's just a big time curveball for some of these athletes, and more power to them if they're able to come in and contribute right away. So Derrick Cummings was one that I had my eye on as well, especially that he got a article. I'm not too sure if you saw the CFL Twitter page posted, Blake, one of the first days of padded practices. I believe it was on Friday. Derrick Cummings was one of the prospects featured on that coach's pick. So
I did see that. Yeah.
Another one that we both brought up, I brought up in my top 5 article, you brought up in the show last week, John Bosse, however you pronounce it. I hope I'm not butchering it too bad, but the University of Calgary offensive lineman who we both talked about being a very athletic guy at 6'6", 6'7", 340, 340 something pounds, was able to test well. I'm not sure if you saw the video that the CFL Twitter posted him kind of being fired up when he was benching as well. He was kind of chanting or kind of antagonizing the guy of let's go. He was getting fired up. So a guy that kind of isn't afraid to show his personality, show that he is I feel like you want offensive linemen kind of maybe a few screws loose, kind of like that mentality, right? Where a guy that's when you're in the trenches, man, it's just not it's not for the faint of heart, I guess is what I would say. It is a kind of eat or be eaten, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, down there in the trenches when guys are trying to move grown men against their own will and kind of trying to embarrass them a lot of the time, right? So a big young fellow that I think will be able to transition well, like we mentioned earlier in the show last week. A guy that was number 17th ranked prospect on the CFL Scouting Bureau coming into the fall edition. A guy that has some flexibility as well. I believe he played offensive tackle at the University of Calgary this past season, but like you mentioned, he has some guard flexibility as well. Playing this morning, he was playing, I believe, predominantly offensive guard, if I was kind of seeing that correctly. A little bit harder to see the universities when they had the not skull caps, I forget what they're called, but the kind of concussion
caps. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, he was predominantly playing guard this afternoon when the CFL was streaming. So a guy that has flexibility of playing both offensive guard and offensive tackle, which is only going to help him when it comes to draft season as well. So John Bosse from the University of Calgary, somebody that I had my eyes on as well. And then my final guy that I had my eyes on as well, Matthew Peterson from the University of Alberta that we both talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Barker mentioned this is a player that probably the closest guy that they've seen to Brady Oliveira that has come out in recent time. And, Brady went to obviously a Division I school down there at Ohio University. Matthew Peterson being up here in U Sports, kind of maybe not being underhanded or kind of, with the hand tied behind his back, because I don't want to kind of underman U Sports, but just with the resources and what you're able to do in Division I and just kind of the money that's put in, it's even kind of more impressive that Matthew Peterson's been able to kind of get this much praise for him coming in. And I feel like he's been a guy that I've been high on since I kind of was able to sit down with him and really kind of pick his brain and see kind of what a young man that he was. Having him on the podcast, episode 29, folks, go check that out if you guys are interested. Super good kind of getting to know Matthew, and I think he's going to be a very good CFLer. Was definitely hearing some good things about him. Like I mentioned, the whole RB group as a whole was getting kind of talked about as, showing at times different kind of strengths for themselves individually. So Matthew Peterson, a guy that I have my eye on. Not too sure. I would love if he was a kind of BC Lion, maybe hopeful. I guess maybe is the right word. Not too sure if the Lions are going to have him kind of maybe a high priority or where we like high enough to be selected. I feel like he's going to be selected in between, maybe the 2nd and 5th round. I feel like the Lions maybe wouldn't consider him until the later rounds where he's probably going to be likely off the board just because of, they have Matal, they have Standback. I feel like you're probably set at that position in terms of just who you need. Obviously, you'll probably bring in a couple of guys from camp, but it'll probably end up being more likely than not a few Americans. And then maybe it's another Keenan LaFrance, if I'm not mistaken, who was on the roster last year
He was.
for most of the year. So maybe it's somebody like that, another veteran that's a Canadian that can kind of be on the roster and add that flexibility. So was going to ask Marshall, like I mentioned, maybe one or two more players other than those three that we just mentioned, on-field standouts. Marshall, JC, excuse me, but wasn't able to get those in. And then as well, the global prospect, somebody that you already brought up that I was going to ask JC that I'm a little bit bummed that we weren't able to, was a prospect that I feel like can be drafted and developed. You mentioned Ezekiel T, who went down to the United States, came back up to Concordia, was a former quarterback turned receiver. Quarterback room going through a little bit of the stomach bug or whatever you want to call it, kind of just not feeling good this morning, down to one quarterback, Jack Sorgotis or Goitis. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but the former
out of Western, right?
Well, he did go to the University of UConn as well. Had my eye on him for a while. I believe he came across my Instagram feed a few years ago. I had been following him. Didn't realize he was at the Combine until I tuned into the bench press and saw him earlier in the week. So I was interested to see how he was going to do. He was the only quarterback available this morning, having to kind of go to a few emergency quarterbacks. Ezekiel T, if I'm saying that correctly, I forgive me. Having to kind of, you saw that the stream kind of pay attention to it. He was able to take a couple of receiver reps. He comes back. He ends up having to take a quarterback rep. Both gloves on. He's got the Geno Smith kind of Kenny Pickett, whatever you want to call it. Both gloves on. Unfortunate. I think for the CFL and they had him earlier in the week kind of taking part, and I think is a good thing is some of the underclassmen, specifically at the quarterback position, when you don't have a lot of quarterbacks coming out in a given year, having some of these underclassmen come out and really participate and take part in the Combine, not as a draftee, but just as a future guy. We saw Jackson Tuchinski, University of Manitoba quarterback, going into his fourth year, his draft eligible year. He took part in some of the testing numbers earlier in the week. Not too sure if he was actually a part of who was kind of who came down with the sick bug and wasn't able to be made available. But whatever your city, and maybe it's Regina next year, right? Maybe it's a Owen Seaban, or maybe it's somebody else from University of Saskatchewan, University of Regina that's on hand that maybe has potential to be an invitee to the Combine, that just kind of gets to be an extra arm, if the quarterbacks are throwing too much, right? Because in those camp environments, me kind of being not a part of any professional camps, but when you go into some of these camps, I think back to like my Raiders spring camp, main camp, you bring in a lot of quarterbacks, probably like 5 or 6, right? 4 or 5 at the most, right? Because you don't want to kind of burn out your first, let's say maybe 3 quarterbacks, having them throw all the time, especially your first 2 quarterbacks, right? When they're kind of throwing an individual to the receiver a bunch, you're throwing an individual when you're getting warmed up, you're throwing probably over 200, 300 balls a day, especially if you're doing 2 days, right? So having to have extra hands on deck is definitely crucial, especially speaking from a quarterback perspective. So I would love to see that in the near future. Maybe hopefully it's an Owen Seaban from the University of Regina. Maybe it's a the name is slipping me, the University of Saskatchewan quarterback, Arnaud, I believe, or not, it's not Arnaud. But the University of Saskatchewan quarterback is a big, very powerful young man. Love to see maybe a couple of those guys. I don't believe it's either of their draft years next year. Owen Seaban, obviously the Canada West Rookie of the Year this past season, so it's definitely not his draft year next year. But I forget the university. It bothers me now, Blake, because I just watched the game the other
Cliffy,
day.
pipe up.
Cliffy might know, honestly, but I guess, Blake, that kind of wraps up the show today. We try to get out of here in an hour, but it's an hour and 4 minutes in, folks. Like JC, my laptop is dying. The faster we go here, we are down to 17%, no charger, but we will kind of end things there. Blake, is there anything else that you wanted to get in, maybe that comes to mind?
No, not really. I mean, JC answered a lot of our questions. I really liked his answer there about the how it's a kind of a catch-22 of the longer combine. I mean, for the prospects that maybe have a bit more to prove, it's a good thing. But for the prospects that are in the top end of the CFL, what will be draft, it's maybe a bad thing. He also kind of we planned, you and I had kind of planned to ask him who the Elks had pegged as number one pick. He kind of answered that without us even having to ask. And he also answered who was a couple of the standouts. And he mentioned something that I found really interesting, and you and I talked about it on Tuesday, was that he thinks that Kevin Matal answered all the questions about his assault charge that came from a bar fight in 2021. And he thinks that that's past Matal and that he's ready to compete in the CFL. So I think JC had some really great insight. We thank him for joining us, and we, of course, wish him a safe flight home. And Cliffy and everyone else that joined us in the chat, thank you, and we look forward to the mock draft that'll probably happen in, I don't know, 3 weeks here, Cole, because the draft is April 30th. So
I would say something like that. Definitely stay tuned to the social media. I guess this is the time of the show to bug and remind everybody all the reminders as always. But was super cool to have JC on, get his experience. JC is definitely a guest I would love to have back on. If there is anybody still watching, let us know in the comments below. Let us know in the chat who is some other guests you would like to see here on the show.
Adam Goss.
Adam Goss. We can definitely do that. A little bit slow right now with kind of just where we are in the CFL season, right? But the more things amp up, the more you're going to see both Blake and I's face more and more, as much as you like that or not. So a lot of these times, right, especially when we get into the season, we're going to have, 21 long episodes to fill this upcoming season.
24, Cole. Don't forget about the playoffs.
So, we do need a lot of time to maybe not kill, but a lot of time to, fill and or get other opinions on. So if there's any other guest, Cliffy in the chat who is, listening to the show tonight, which we appreciate, will definitely be a guest from an Alouette's perspective. But, maybe if you want to see like maybe a Coach Phil from a Riders or just a CFL perspective, Rod Peterson from the Riders or something like that. Marshall Ferguson, any of the guys at CFP, anything like that, let us know. Maybe it's a Diego
Coach
Sanchez.
Campbell, maybe. You never know.
Yep. Diego Sanchez, Dwayne Ford from TSN, something like that. Let us know in the comments below. Like, I've said before, right? This is, maybe it sounds a little bit corny, but this is a show, by the fans, for the fans, right? So Blake and I are nothing more than just, fans and passionate fans of the CFL, hence the name of the podcast, right? Canadian Football Fanatics. Fanatics is just an extension of the word of just, fan, right? Of being a diehard fan.
Mm-hmm.
So Blake and I are nothing more than Canadian football.
Even if you guys have any U Sports, I mean, once in the summer, of course, the U Sports hasn't started yet, but once we get into the past Labor Day and stuff like that, when the U Sports season starts, maybe we can see if we can get some Canada West players on, or maybe even further out east, or OUA, RSEQ, Atlantic Canada, stuff like that.
Big time. Agree with that. I definitely are in the works of getting some Canada West type guests to join us. I believe Matt Young should be joining us on a quite frequent basis from Canada West TV throughout the year to give us kind of his opinion of being on the sidelines of all these Canada West games every week in the Canada West U Sports football. So, like I mentioned, let us know who you guys would like to see on the channel. The closer we get to the CFL season, the more you guys are going to see us and have to put up with us on the YouTube in the content algorithm internet world. So get used to it, folks, because we are only coming to your screen more and more, and we are excited the more we get closer to the CFL season. It's got to be under 50 days to Kamloops now, and it's got to be under, maybe.
You want me to do the count? So what are we at? March 24th today. So 7 days.
We'll be home a month from now, or not a month from now, I guess.
It's 54 days is the exact. Cole and I are planning to go up on the Friday, May the 17th. So 54 days before we're up in Kamloops for Lions training camp.
And we cannot wait. Going to be a lot of fun up there covering Lions training camp. Like I mentioned, guys, just let us know if there's anything you guys want us to cover from up there as well. I know there's a lot of CFL fans, not just Lions fans, but Blake and I being, I was going to say guilty Lions fans, but proud Lions fans are going to do our best to get out the best kind of content for Lions the lines down across, BC and the CFL. We got to think about our Lions fans in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and all across our beautiful country of Canada. So all the reminders, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff over on YouTube. Get the subscriber count up over or even to 150 subscribers so we can get on the same pace as the Instagram page. That would be awesome. The Instagram page at Canadian Football Fanatics up to 150 followers. I believe we're not even a month into having the Instagram, so doing quite well over there. That's the best way to kind of keep tabs of when we're going live, what kind of content we're posting. You can also find Blake and I at Twitter or on Twitter at Coleman Garvey, at Blake
3653, and my Instagram is a lot easier to remember, but it's at b.milton97.
Blake 3653. I will remember that eventually. Give me by the season, I will remember Blake's tag on Twitter without having to ask Blake. But as always, we appreciate all the support so much. Actually had quite the active chat tonight, which was fun. Like I said, guys, always wanted to get you guys involved in the chat. So please keep filling your opinion, your thoughts in the chat. Even if we don't agree, right? We want to kind of get other opinions that maybe change our opinion and maybe create kind of maybe a segue or a path that may be something that we don't think or can maybe view of that certain topic. So feel free to interact with us in the chat. We greatly appreciate it. Another quick shout out. Stay tuned to 13th Man Sports. I will try to put out an article maybe this coming week of some risers, some fallers after the Combine. Big shout out as well to Mackenzie Dunfort over at Big Mac Graphics.
Yes, as always, thank you, Mackenzie,
for creating all our cool thumbnails, all that good stuff. Appreciate all Mackenzie's hard work for the Canadian Football Fanatics, creating our cool logo. I almost forgot here, buddy. Quick reminder as well. We do have merch now officially. Go vote over on the Instagram poll. Has been doing quite well. Whether we have 100 people that are interested or 10 people that are interested, probably going to still put out merch. So, go let your opinion be known. How would you guys like to see some merch? Would you guys like a nice big logo like this? Would you like maybe one big logo on the right with maybe something on the back? Let us know what kind of
maybe
merch.
mine and Cole's face on it with
maybe
CFC.
mine and Blake's face on it. Let us know. Hoodies, snapbacks, trucker hats. Would you guys like to see stuff like that? Stickers. Would you like to see more stuff available like that you can buy for the Canadian Football Fanatics? Have a lot of planned, folks. Last reminder before we get out of here, mock draft that we will be coming in, I would say, let's say 14 to 21 days. Stay tuned to the Instagram. Stay tuned to both of our social medias. I will have some sort of thumbnail or something drawn up or made up by Mackenzie, getting it out there to you guys to get prepared. That'll be a super cool night for us to do, to hopefully have a bunch of people in the chat, maybe have some people that are, trying to persuade some of these GMs that we're getting being placed as, GMs as these teams, Cliffy being one of them. Cliffy being in charge of the Montreal reigning Grey Cup champions, Montreal Alouettes. Cliffy will have all control of the Montreal Alouettes and who they choose in the first 3 rounds of the upcoming draft. Of course, Blake and I will have all control of our BC Lions. So, join the chat. Let us know how you guys are feeling, what you guys would like us to see. And maybe if you guys would like to see more than 3 rounds. I'm thinking 3 rounds is probably perfect area for now, just because of that's probably a perfect ballpark for everyone's knowledge of some of these prospects in U Sports, NCAA, all that good stuff. So for now, Blake and I will be out of here for a few weeks. Stay tuned to the Instagram. We'll be posting content, though. The Canadian Football Fanatics never stop. Blake, buddy, I appreciate you for joining me. As always, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody. Thank you for joining the Canadian Football Fanatics, and we will see you guys on the next episode.